Philippines has set a new record in the number of fresh COVID-19 cases for the second consecutive day. Over 9,800 new infections were reported today, bringing the country's total caseload to above 700,000.
The Octa research team warns that at least 2 provinces outside the NCR plus bubble are also showing surges in COVID-19 infections.
Many of our workers in Metro Manila come from these provinces, so there's movement of goods and services, and so it's only natural that it will spread.
The National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, or NITAG, says it is unfortunate that mayors and other personalities have gotten vaccinated ahead of healthcare workers.
When we say substitution, it means that when we've exhausted the list that, say for example, for the tertiary hospital that is initially the ones that are supposed to be vaccinated, then the next in line should be the identified. They're still health workers.
The daily tally of COVID-19 infections has reached another all-time high while the government struggles to make sense of the vaccination rollout and restrictions. What are the better explanations for the magnitude of infections? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of the Chiefs. Also with me are Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star and Ed Lingao of One News. Ami, Ed, musta?
Happy weekend.
Oh,
happy.
so
Happy, no?
Not so happy. Okay. Okay, take it back.
just in time, heading into Palm Sunday, heading into Holy Week. Ito ang pantapos natin sa linggo.
We're approaching 10,000. Ano ba naman yan? Kakatotoo yata yung sinabi ng OCTA na 11,000 by the end of the month.
Oh, and then remember, may projections pa sila for the middle of April, but that
Yes.
was before the lockdown that they were urging, that they were calling for. Pero on top of that, I mean, bukod doon sa COVID front, we also have some big news, di ba, Ami, from the World Bank, Moody's,
Yes.
both really now, I mean, parang almost getting rid of the euphemisms about how the economy is just not working, and all the government interventions are, frankly, putting it bluntly, not working.
Yes, and they compared us to the performance of our neighbors. Kaya yun ang problema. Medyo masama.
Yun ang masakit eh. Yun ang masaklap.
Yan ang ano. Kaya titingnan natin kung ano sagot ng gobyerno dyan. Saka maybe we can get the views of our guests, no?
Oh, sige.
Yeah, I smell the segue coming up.
Oh,
Pandemic response yun di ba? Yung pinag-uusapan yung pandemic response
Oh, this is still the big backdrop to everything. So let's bring her in. Let's bring in Dr. Consorcia Lim Quizon of the DOH Interim Immunization Technical Advisory Group, or NITAG, on COVID-19 vaccines. Good evening, Dr. Conky.
Good evening,
Good
Robbie,
evening po.
Ed. Good evening, Ed. Good evening, Ami. Magandang gabi sa lahat ng mga nanonood.
Doc, let me start by just turning the headline into a question. No, parang kasi parang it's hard to hear. How real is that? I mean, are we really jeopardizing our place in COVAX? I mean, ano ba to? Parang nakakatakot, and I'm sure that's the purpose of telling everyone, hoy, mag-ayos-ayos kayo. Kung hindi, we might lose our place here. But how real is that possibility?
It is real. You know, before we started, before the Department of Health started the COVID plan, really it was stipulated there, and there was this understanding that the COVAX facilities, or what is going to be donated by WHO, should be used only for yung mga prioritized groups na sinasabi. That's why the first step that DOH did was form the NITAG, and then the NITAG was the one who said, okay, pag-aralan mabuti, these are the priority groups. And you know, that didn't happen overnight. I mean, there was a lot of debate on sino ba may karapat-dapat talaga na mauna, mahuli, and so on and so forth. So it's really unfortunate na, but I guess it's not totally unexpected, but it's rather unfortunate. But the threat is real.
Yes.
The threat is real.
But Doc,
Well, not the threat. Yeah.
But Doc, let's bring back that process para may konting background tayo. As you said, it wasn't overnight, matagal pinag-usapan yan. I'm sure a lot of people were saying, well, what about this sector? Well, what about this sector? Did local officials figure into that conversation? Because you can make a case that local officials are frontliners as well. Bring us back to those conversations, and how was that framed? How was that eventually resolved?
Well, first of all, we have to have numbers. We have to have evidence, right? Who or what is driving the epidemic and who are most at risk. So, kaya nga sabi natin, health workers, no questions about that. You know? And then comes and then we have to follow also the pattern that is being seen globally. Kung kaya to sinabi ng WHO na in most other countries, you know, second in line, ang senior citizens and then comorbidities. So we followed. We look at the numbers and then we followed, you know. And then fourth is when we already tried to save the economy, that is bringing the essential workers na sila ang kasunod sa A4. So yun. And sino sa mga essential workers? So panibago na naman na prioritization yan. So actually, when we first presented, because remember that NITAG is recommendatory. When we presented to IATF, they in fact already asked yung mga local chief executives, yung mga head ng mga LGUs, shouldn't they be considered as frontliners, you know, because ganito. Yes, if we had enough vaccine. I mean, if it so happened na ang unang bagsak sa atin is 20 million doses, why not? You know? But the thing is, the first bagsak of the doses wasn't even enough to cover the health workers, and you know that. And that is the reason why we were so very, very particular on talagang sa kanila na lang muna. We have to bite the bullet and say, sa kanila na lang muna.
Doctor, hindi naman sinasabi nila na frontliner sila eh. May nadagdag na naman na 8 ngayon LGU officials na pinatatawag ng DILG, no? Pare-pareho sinabi nila, they want to dispel vaccine hesitancy kasi ayaw daw ng mga kasama nila na parang nag-uudyukan sila, mauna muna kayo.
Oo.
Valid is that? Kasi hindi ba nagkaroon tayo high profile? Everybody was covering the doctors here. Yung official na matataas na lahat sila. Si Vaccine Tsar, si Vince Dison, saka si Ben-Hur Abalos. Lahat sila in public nagpa-vaccinate with Sinovac. That's very important. So, ano pang may have vaccine hesitancy pa ba?
Ganito yon. Remember na nandito muna tayo dun sa healthcare workers. Okay? So, ang pinakamainam na influencer sa healthcare worker ay mga hepe nila or kapwa-doktor. Diba? So, actually, kahit noon pa, humihirit din na kailangan ng influencers, no? Siguro, yes, I would agree na kailangan ng influencers. Depende dun sa kung sino na yung audience or kung sino na yung susunod. So this early, hindi pa tayo nakakarating sa general population. So I guess to say na they would be influencers for the healthcare workers, sabi nyo nga, meron na nakapag-influence. Siguro pagdating do sa general population, kahit ikaw, kahit ako pwede, especially you guys, you also have your circles of influence na napaka-importante nyo na pag nakitang kayo na una, you know, marami kayong mapapasunod. So, ganun lang yon. But the thing is, wala pa nga tayo doon sa cluster o sa grupong yon. Kaya, I guess, hindi masyado mag-fluffla yung argument na it's, to influence.
Doc, let me put it this way lang po. Benta ba sa inyo yung rason na yon? Benta ba sa inyo? Pag sa inyo ginamit yung rason na yun, hindi, ako yung mayor dito eh. Kailangan kong educate yung mga tao. Benta ba sa inyo yun? Would that hold any water for you?
For me, as I said, depende kung halimbawa yung eto na tayo dun sa punto na general population na yung bibigyan natin, you know, especially if that mayor happens to be a very charismatic mayor or talagang may hatak sa kanyang mga constituency, well, why not? Maybe, right? But kaya pinauna ko kanina na sa puntong ito, nasa healthcare workers tayo eh. So siguro
Pero po
yung
kasi, all politicians po all politicians po would use that argument na I'm influential among my constituency. That's why I got elected. Di ba? In other words, every politician could use that argument.
Dami no,
And
libo-libo.
every politician is a legend in his own mind.
Diba?
Ano ba masasabi ko? Again, babalikan ko, kung talagang sapat lamang sana ang vaccine natin, bakit ba ang hindi?
Okay.
Lalo pa kung makikita nila na, o sige, kung yung vaccine na hindi ko pinagkakatiwalaan, ayun, nauna siya, o sige, baka sakali, no? But really, it's because at this point, we don't have enough. Baka sakaling come second, third quarter of this year, kapag kasabay-sabay dumating yung in order o talagang on time na dumating yung mga nakaschedule, well, who knows?
No, but Doc, in the meantime, ano ba, we're trying to get a picture of how it is on the ground. Because when you say sapat, di ba, may konteksto rin yun, di ba? Parang obviously hindi sapat sa buong bayan, pero pagka na-deploy na, then there's questions of mauubos ba, may reluctance ba, dumadating ba yung mga nag-sign up, and so on. And then now we're looking at surveys that actually mataas pa rin yung hesitancy sa mga tao, no? And there are some people, and therefore, apart doon sa sinabi nyo, meron ding argument, I want to test that argument also, na sinasabi nila, sayang naman, hindi sumipot yung ibang mga dapat bay nakunahan, sila nga una dapat sa pila, sila dapat pangalawa, hindi naman dumating, sayang naman, mapapanis lang yung bakuna. Is that a valid argument?
Hindi, kasi may nakasunod sa pila eh. Diba? Kasi we talked about, first it's the health workers, then it's the senior citizens, right? Then it's those who have comorbidities or may ibang sakit. So, may nakapila pa.
Okay.
Na maliwanag yung pila.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that
I
brings
guess
me...
that's not gonna fly.
No, that brings me to the next question. Did you hear about this quick substitution system or quick substitution list? Is this something that was discussed ahead of time? Does the protocol for that, in fact, exist? Because when nung binanggit ni and in-announce at kinumpirma ni Pala spokesman Harry Roque, it seemed to catch a lot of people by surprise. On the one hand, DILG was scrambling to say that, yeah, we'll need to clarify the protocols and so on. But we asked also Undersecretary Echeverry here yesterday point blank, and he admitted basically this is the first time actually that we're hearing about this substitution list. What do you know about the substitution list?
Well, all I know is that we have a priority list. And it's A1, A2, A3, A4, it's there. You know, so that strictly speaking, when you say substitute, ibig sabihin, hindi na gamit para doon sa kung sino yung priority first. Then there is the list and so on down the line. And so, strictly speaking, I'm going to say, if you say substitution list, then the substitute will be the next in line. Not any Tom, Dick, and Harry, I guess, na hinatak mo lang dyan sa kalye.
So after health worker, yung senior citizen, ano?
Senior citizens.
Kasi yung original na explanation, we're talking about Mark Anthony Fernandez now, ano? Diyan lumabas yung quick substitution na yan eh. Pero part 2 na yung explanation. Yung original na explanation, may comorbidity daw siya. Hypertension daw. E tinitingnan ko, 2012, there was a study by the Hypertension Society or something. 21% of Filipinos are suffering from hypertension. Lahat ba yun? Priority ba yun sa comorbidity?
Oo, actually, you know, talagang nilista yon, priority. And actually, when we do those with comorbidity, may overlap na yan eh. Kasi meron naman mga essential workers o yung mga nagtatrabaho na meron din sakit. So na-overlap na rin for yung general population or yung sa mga essential workers na iba.
So kailangan pa rin health worker, senior citizen, tapos serious comorbidity yan, ano? Hindi naman minor na...
No. We're not saying, taka. Yung serious, no? We're saying comorbidity, kasama dito yung mataas ang presyon, diabetes, sakit sa puso, cancer, yung mga yon. Kaya lang dapat, at the time na babakunahan ka, kontrolado mga yon. It means, diabetic ka, pero at that time na aanuhin ka, babakunahan ka, normal yung sugar level mo or normal yung BP mo kung hypertensive ka. So, pwede ang mga yon. Those are not contraindications to be vaccinated.
So, ibig
The impression we were getting...
priority. Sige, Ed.
Now, Doc, the impression we were getting from Secretary Roque yesterday was that meron talagang secondary or substitute list per se. I mean, it didn't seem like he was referring to going down the list that was already approved. It sounded like meron talagang isa pang listahan na pang backup dun sa unang listahan. I'm wondering lang, would the NITAG need to go through that list as well and evaluate and assess the priorities? Kasi baka po mamaya kanya-kanyang listahan niya ng kanya-kanyang LGU. And then the NITAG's role would have been diluted.
Again, I will say that the NITAG is recommendatory. You know, we give our recommendations to IATF and then they translate that into resolutions or for operationalization. So I guess because they are the executory people, nasa sa kanila yon. Kami, up to the last granular na pwedeng explain kung ano yung mga recommendations namin. We do that. But we are not the executory arm.
We understand. Pero as far as you're concerned, any secondary list should still follow the priority list.
Yes.
It just goes up. Umakit lang. Hindi po talagang separate list altogether.
Yes, definitely. We have that priority list na sunod-sunod.
So kung may hindi mababakunahang health worker, dapat senior citizen ang hanapin niyo.
Oo.
No? Kasi
Kasunod na
sabi niya, especially with AstraZeneca daw, kasi 10 doses per vial, di ba? Eh pag may natira daw na isa, kaya yun ang sinasabi nila na kahit sino na lang na makakuha doon na naka-register for at nakalinya doon at that time. Tama ba yung reasoning niya?
Oo. Well, ganito yon ha. Kasi ideally, kapag halimbawa doon sa vaccination hub, no?
Yes.
So, alam mo exactly, as much as possible to the last person, alam mo kung ilan yung mababakunahan o pumayag mabakunahan for that day. Ngayon, nagbukas ka ng isang multi-dose vial. So, alam mo halimbawa na may 3 o 4 na doses na matitira doon. So, theoretically, before the start of the day, na-identify mo na o natawagan mo na yung taong yon para hindi mo sasabihin na any Tom, Dick, and Harry ang hahatakin mo para hindi masayang yung bakuna. Theoretically and ideally.
Okay.
Not unless it works in their favor to have all these the possible absentees.
Ako po ay ordinaryong NITAG member lang kaya hindi ko masagot yung sinasagot.
Sige.
Probinsyana lang ako, hindi ko kaya sagutin niya.
Okay, sige. Then let's bring it to, hopefully this brings it closer sa mandato ng NITAG. No? Let's bring it to the context this week. Heading into Holy Week, as we said, we're hitting, i-round off na natin 10,000 cases. No? 10,000 cases today. People were warning about this about a month ago pa lang, di ba? Okta Research certainly was already saying aabot dito by mid-April. It was some other more horrific number if nothing happens. And yet, through all of this, parang wala naman po tayong konseptong hindi na kailangan pag-usapan. People have talking about granular lockdown. People have talked about stricter quarantines, masking, proper behavior, and so on. Meron pa po ba tayong nami-miss out na konsepto dito or meron bang usapin dito na kailangan ng pag-igtingin?
Ginagawa ba? Ibig sabihin, we can, nanggagalaitin na tayo at nagmamakaawa sa mga tao to do their part, right? Because as I said, the first line of defense is actually the individual and not the people at the hospital, right? So if all of us are going to do our part, especially now, no? For me, lockdown or no lockdown, quarantine or no quarantine, if you have no business going outside, please don't do so. Now is the perfect time to be praning, to feel that every person na masalubong mo sa daan ay pugad ng virus. Kung pwede lang, go away. Yung ganon. So, we have to take care of ourselves. And until we're really consistently and correctly doing all these precautionary measures, then it's gonna go on and on. And hanggang kailan tayo magtatago? You know, the spot of bright news, at least for me, is that, okay, we have 10,000 cases. The number of deaths, if I'm not mistaken, is 50 or 54.
Opo, mga
So
50
50 out of 10,000 is like, paano ba yun? Anong porsyento nyon? Kasi hindi ba, normally yan, acceptable yung hanggang 2% yung tinatawag na death rate.
Yeah, that's
No?
0.5.
So, right, so it's 0.5. But then, hindi pa natin alam, di pa natin naririnig. And there are pockets. I understand, for example, that Dr. Nina Carandang is saying, Conky, Los Baños is getting it bad. That we had 5 deaths as of yesterday. So even though as a whole yung 54 is buti na lang, kontrolado pa natin or hindi pa ganun nakakataranta, record-breaking and deaths, you know. So, but still there are pockets of places wherein hindi na rin acceptable yung nakukuha nilang death rates. So yun, sana it will rise. Okay? Bakit? Kasi yung nangyari 2 weeks ago nung nag-umpisang tumaas, tapos hindi pa tayo nagkulong agad or hindi tayo kumilos, o di syempre nagkalat yung mga virus na yun. Hanggang hindi na i-exhaust nun lahat ng pwede niyang hawahan, tataas at tataas yung mga number. Ngayon, kung karamihin sa atin nagtago na, nag-ingat na, wala nang lulundagan yung virus. So hopefully, yung sinasabi natin in the next 2 or 3 weeks, babalik dun sa talagang acceptable levels, 1,000, 2,000 per day.
Doctor, i-apply lang natin yan because Holy Week na. We're entering into Holy Week. Ano po yung advice nyo by way of observing Holy Week? Kasi pinayagan na yung once a day mass at churches but with 10% maximum capacity. Ano po yung advice nyo sa mga tao gusto mag-observe ng Holy Week while at the same time observing the health protocol?
Oo. Siyempre, ang hirap magsabi because this is religious conviction, no? Kasi para sa akin, it's something between me and my God. Whether I go to the church itself or whether taimtim ako manalangin sa bahay, it's me and my God na nag-uusap. And my God would probably understand na I will be protecting yung kapwa ko na image and likeness of God kung hindi ako maglalalabas. So, I know it's so hard to go against tradition. But you know, nung season 1, which is last year, di ba? Nung talagang complete lockdown tayo, tawag ko dito season 2 para K-drama. Okay, so nung season 1, nagawa na natin yan nanahimik tayo. So please po, sabi ko nga, whether the national or the local government asks for a lockdown or stricter quarantine, let's do our part. You know, let's lock ourselves in and not go out and you know, not have spectacular family reunions.
Doc, I think we have 1 more week to go before we hopefully start feeling the effects of itong bubble. Hopefully more positive effects of the bubble. So sabi natin mga 7 days, at the rate we're going po kasi it's almost hitting 10,000 per day. So in the next 7 days, that could be almost 60 to 70,000 dadagdag na active cases. Are we ready for that? We might be hitting 140, 150,000, 160,000 active cases by next week.
And it's going to be the health system that's going to be overwhelmed, hindi ba? Kaya nga, but
That's
as
like
long...
a 50% increase in active cases in just 7
kaya
days.
Kaya nga ang sinasabi natin, alam natin kung kailan tayo pupunta sa hospital at alam natin kung kailan yung isolation facilities muna. Para hindi natin ma-overwhelm at ma-save natin yung hospital beds doon sa mga talagang mangangailangan ng hospital beds. Okay? So there's that. Again, I'm going to say we have to bite the bullet pero wala tayong magagawa. Kundi ganun muna na manalangin na okay, we have this surge of cases, pero hopefully mild. Para nun, kayang-kayang, you know, within our own systems, kayang-kayang pagalingin na hindi mangangailangan nung extra special care sa mga hospitals na limitado ang kapasidad para absorb ang ganon karami na mga moderate or severe cases. So, isa siguro yon sa ipapanalangin natin sa Holy Week. That we may not be able to control the number of cases that is spiraling now. But we hope we can really keep down the number of severe cases in order to be able to control the number of deaths.
Doc, let me ask you about that po kasi ang sabi nga ng Private Hospitals Association, 98% ng mga nasa hospital nila ngayon are mild to asymptomatic and they should be in the quarantine facilities, not in the hospitals where they're of course, they're mabigat yan sa mga medical workers eh, di ba?
Oo,
Sa alagaan ng
oo.
mga tao yan eh. So, but how do we decongest all these people and shift them to quarantine facilities? Di ba medyo madugo yun na parang ililipat na yung tao nakalatay.
Hindi ka naman nakaratay, mild case ka. Hopefully hindi ka nakaratay.
Wrong word. Yung nakaiga.
There are those, I know that there are LGUs na kasi sobrang punong-puno na rin ng mga ospital nila na nag-allow sila ng kung alam nila na yung nag-positive ay responsableng tao at talagang kaya niyang i-isolate ang sarili niya sa bahay, inalaw nila na sa bahay. Kumbaga, tinatawagan or minomonitor sa bahay. Kung walang nararamdaman, okay, nag-positive, asymptomatic, o sige, ikulong mo sarili mo sa bahay. The minute na meron kang maramdaman, let's say, o di mild ka, doon ka mo, lipat ka doon sa isolation facilities and so on down the line. So, well, that is probably one strategy if we really can trust itong mga nag-positive na pag sinabi, ikulong mo sarili mo, huwag ka rin makikisalamuha doon sa kasambahay mo, yung ganon. So, that's a big if, you know, that could work. Kasi, ano rin na magagawa natin kung talagang punong-puno na ang ating mga isolation facilities.
Ay, Doc, review tayo ng mga best practices. Gaya nga ng sabi nyo, ituloy lang natin yung mga best practices. No question about mask, no question about face shield, social distancing, hugas ng kamay. Pero kung naaalala nyo, nung season 1, di ba? Mas paraning tayo, nung season 1, parang mas marami yung rules eh. Di ba? Parang, in fact, people were making up we were worried about fomites, for example. May mga literature that were saying, pati yung mga nahahawakan, pati yung mga dinideliver sa inyo, mag-ingat kayo. Alcohol mo yan. Bawat binili mo, alcohol bago ipasok.
Using UV light.
Mag-disinfect ka ng paa bago ka pumasok. Hiwala yung tsinelas sa labas. Mas marami dati. Review lang po tayo. May updates ba po tayo doon? Meron po bang mga medyo ano na yan? Season 1 yan, Season 2, wala na yan?
Kasi na yan, Season 2 na tayo. No? Hindi, alam mo, kaya nga, continue pa rin tayo na nagsasabing hand washing and this alcohol and disinfectants, gano'n. Because that is still true. Na makakahawa ka pa rin doon sa fomites. Hindi ba? Pero kaya talaga, ang safest kung hindi ka talaga lumalabas ng bahay, hindi rin mabubugahan. I need to say something which I find so one of the most hygienic practices na kahit sa mga probinsya hindi na ginagawa ngayon. Noong unang panahon, pag pumasok ka ng bahay, maghuhubad, take off your shoes. Hindi ba? When I was small, I thought that was a sign of respect dun sa household na nagtatanggal ka ng sapatos. And then ngayon na pag-isip-isip ko, it's actually very hygienic. Kasi ano mga natapakan mo sa kalye pagkatapos ipapasok mo sa bahay yung sapatos mo, hindi ba? I guess that would be a very good, at least for me, I'm observing that na, sige, mula ngayon kung ano yung ginamit na footwear sa labas, hindi natin ipapasok sa loob ng bahay. Season 2.
Huwag mo papasukin.
Sa totoo lang, in the first place, hindi ka nga pala dapat lumabas, hindi ba?
Mag-text ka na lang.
Oo, ano ba sapatos sa sinasabi ko? Oo.
Doctor, nabanggit namin at the start of the show yung observation ng World Bank. It was a report that was released in embargo, nilabas lang kanina na tayo daw it led to economic deterioration daw na kulang yung ating testing. Kulang na kulang compared to our neighbors. Kulang na kulang ang testing at sobra yung lockdown. What can you say about that observation?
Well, unang-una hindi ako ekonomista, no? So Ewan ko kung ano yung epekto nun. Pero yung sinasabing kulang ang testing, you know, siguro. Pero on the other hand, hanggang ganun ang kakayahan natin. At kung hindi natin na-test at totoong may sakit, makikita natin sa mga hospitals. Di ba? Halimbawa, hindi na-testing, nagkalat, meron at merong magmamanifest. Before itong surge na to, hindi naman natin nakita na parang in excess yung mga natatanggap natin na mga pneumonia or flu-like cases sa mga hospitals natin. So, hindi ko masabi kung talagang kulang ba o hindi ang testing natin. And syempre may proseso yan. We really cannot test any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Ibig sabihin, merong, you know, you have to follow a medical protocol that, for example, if you were exposed or may history ka ng ganito-ganito, that's when it calls for testing. It's not because, naku, yung kapitbahay ko, nabalitaan ko na may COVID, baka ako rin meron, makapagpa-test nga. Yung ganon. So, I'm sorry, I'm actually commenting on something na hindi maliwanag sa akin kung paano yung pagkakasulat that they're saying kulang tayo sa testing. And the other one that you said is about, Ami?
Very long lockdowns combined daw with the long lockdown.
Kasi they consider yung ginawa natin na parang quarantine, yung mga iba-ibang level ng quarantine, they consider that as lockdown. O sige, di ba ang Europa nasa ika-third lockdown? Hindi ba? Parang mas gusto ko na yata yung pagtiisan natin na humaba kesa yung bukas-sara, and then sabog na sabog ang cases. Mas gusto ko na yata yung, sige, nagtiis-tiis tayo na mahaba-haba. Well, different opinions. Opinion lang po.
Health worker.
Doc, may binigit kanina si Secretary Roque na the possibility daw of vaccinating early yung those he calls the economic frontliners with the arrival of another 1 million doses of Sinovac, I think next week. Is that in the list or this is wishful thinking?
Oo, no, nasa A4 sila, hindi ba? Yung tapos ng health workers, tapos seniors, tapos comorbids. Tapos yung A4 are actually the essential workers. Ito na yung mga economic drivers, so to speak, na ano. So, alam mo, mukha lang tayong siguro kawawa or we are so worried because nagtitrickle sa ngayon yung vaccine. But we are made to understand na come the next 2 or 3 months, talagang bubuhos sa atin yung mga vaccine. So siguro, by that time, talagang hindi tayo mag-worry na bakit naiiwanan ng mga economic workers. So hopefully talagang mabubuksan ng gripo ng todo and then we can be able to really vaccinate a bigger chunk of the population.
Yes, Doc. Pero he was talking about the 1 million doses arriving next week, not 2 and 3 months down the line. So I was wondering, kasi hindi pa tayo tapos with the health workers. That's much further down the line.
Oo. Hindi ko alam. Ang masasabi ko lang, 1 million doses, would that make a dent? Would that make an impact? Even considering that it will actually be done. Remember that the 1 million doses will actually be translated into 500,000 doses, right? Kasi agad divided by 2. So, palagay mo na, for the sake of argument na gagawin yon, yung bang 500,000 na binigay mo for the health force, economic workforce would actually make a dent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Doctor,
mahiwagang buhay ng tao.
Nakukuha niyo tuloy ang aking mga theme song.
Okay, Dr. Kongki, maraming salamat po. Always a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doc. Ingat po.
Dr. Maria
Ayun.
Consorcia Lim Quizon. We need to take a break. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs, here on One News. We are now in the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us are Chavali Pamela Osathanugrah and Leah Bautista of the Zonta International Foundation. Welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
I have to confess, I've been practicing that name throughout the whole break. Osathanugrah. I mean, am I pronouncing that the right name? And can I just call you Pamela or Chavali?
Please, just call me Pam.
Pam.
And you did pronounce it very well.
Okay.
Pronounce it very well.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you know, Zonta International, of course, and this is we're still in Women's Month, and Zonta, of course, is an organization that works for women's rights. They hope they work so that women's rights are recognized as human rights. They want a world where every woman is able to achieve her full potential. So let me start with a big question. How are we doing in the Philippines?
We're doing in the Philippines, we're actually doing very well because if you would like to know, you have to be proud of this. The Philippines is where Zonta came to Asia in 1952. That was like nearly 70 years ago. And the first club in the Philippines is Manila 1, Area 1. But for now, they're called Manila 1, but actually when they were founded, it was Zonta Club is Manila.
Okay.
So I have to say that the Philippines are leading us in Asia. And we just tagged along later on, like 16 years later. But they're doing very well. And our Lieutenant Governor, Leah Bautista, is also from Area 1. And she'll be able to fill in the gaps for us for what they are doing as well. So if Leah would like to take the floor.
Oh, yes. Well, we have 4 areas in the Philippines. We actually have 1,500 members in the Philippines, and we have like 55 clubs from north to south. So we are divided into 4 areas. The areas covered in Area 1 are Manila, north of Pasig. So there are about 15 clubs. Area 5 is south of Pasig, and there are 20 clubs. In the north, we have 8 clubs, and in the south, Visayas and Mindanao, we have 12 clubs. Now, we have local community projects that cover a wide range of women issues such as women's health, women's legal, political, economic, educational concerns, and of course, violence against women. Just to give you an example of the service projects that we do, for health, we have cancer clearance. Well, I'm sharing with you projects that we have been doing, but of course, during the pandemic, we were affected and we cannot really go out, especially now. These are the projects that we've had. We had cancer clearance for women. We gave transportation allowance to students. Now we found creative ways of doing project, and we even have urban gardening project benefiting 3 communities and 500 families. On advocacy projects, we have the Psychological Center for Sexually Abused Girls. We have the Kababaihan Project that provides livelihood projects, and we always celebrate women and recognize women who have contributed to society, and that is the Bravo Awards.
Okay. But Leah, is it across all of those areas, as you mentioned, health, empowerment, opportunities, and even, as you said, violence against women? Across all of those areas, you would say that Filipino women, we are at least progressing and doing well?
Yes, the governor gives us the direction at the start of the biennium on what projects she would want us to do. And the theme for this biennium is, Japan would be better to say.
District theme.
The district theme.
Right. The link to the future is now. Let us embrace the new normal with optimism for women. And we have the 3 R's that we're concerned with, with the pandemic, and then also with the natural disasters that have claimed so many casualties in your country. back in November and November. So we have had the 3 R's, the recovery, the rebuild, and to rehabilitate.
Ladies, I wanted to ask you about the impact of the pandemic on women's welfare. Because we've had a lot of, mostly bad news in the Philippines about how the pandemic's affecting our women in terms of livelihood, in terms of domestic violence. Could you tell us more? Because you are in constant touch with women and women's groups. Could you tell us more
Okay.
about it?
Well, DG.
Okay, Leah.
Oh, during this lockdown, we saw that there is an increase in violence against women and children. There is an increase in cases of domestic violence, sexually, physically, psychologically. Women bear the additional burden of household chores during this during this pandemic, and we saw that we can see that women are there are more women as frontliners. One of the problems that we actually think that prevalent like these times is the online sexual exploitation of children. So during the 16 days of activism, we have a lot of webinars about that to increase awareness and to spread knowledge about it.
And Pam, are there other projects that Zonta is involved in to promote women and girls' welfare during the pandemic, related to the pandemic?
Yes, across the district, because our district is composed of 4 countries and Hong Kong and Macau. So we are all involved in community-based programs, service projects to ensure that we get back better. Because worldwide, since the pandemic has begun, there have been like a 5-fold increase in domestic violence, in gender-based violence, and in domestic violence because of the lockdowns. And it has affected women and girls, like mentally and psychologically and physically, emotionally. So we have, we're all doing most of our areas. We have area 1, 3, 4, and 5 in the Philippines, as Lieutenant Governor Leah has mentioned. And we have area 2 in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Macau, and in Malaysia. And area 6 is here in Thailand, where I am based. And all of us are now very aware of the situation, and we're doing all we can to help those who are in need, the women and the girls who really need our help now more than ever. Because we call it the shadow pandemic, which is the abuse, the gender-based domestic violence. They call it the shadow pandemic. But actually, I heard from a young member who said that, why do we have to call it shadow? It's actually not a shadow. It is actually also a pandemic. It is within this COVID-19 pandemic. So we're doing all we can. The service projects that we have integrated, the programs that we can help all those who have been affected.
You know, I've always wondered. I've heard of Zonta from before, but I've always wondered what it stood for or what it meant. And I did a bit of fact reading. It turns out it's an American Indian word, or I don't know if it's Lakota or Sioux, that stands for honesty
honest and
integrity.
Trustworthy.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about Zonta itself and its history.
Yes. Okay. Well, Zonta actually was founded November 8th, 1919, which was right after the First World War ended. And this group of the first college-educated American young professionals, they decided to come together to form a club later on became a confederation of clubs because they realized that women were really, really behind, in all spheres of life, and to do something to ensure that women also have the rights as men do. And the important thing then was to have the right to vote. Because in the US, the amendment of the Constitution in 1919, right? That was a women's suffrage, that women had the right to vote. And when you have the right to vote and you have the right to other elements in life that are important to you, the right to obtain an education, to have equal opportunities in all areas. And so this group of women led by Marianne DeForest was a journalist and a playwright. And she was the charter president of Zonta. But later on, they had the Confederation of Zonta Clubs with the first elected president, Mary Jenkins. So we've had a long way. We've come a long way, and there have been hurdles, along the way. But we never stop. And even now, 102 years later, we're close to 102 years old. We still continue. And that Zonta started in Buffalo, New York, USA, as you probably know, and that has expanded past 100 years to around the world. So it became known as Zonta International in 1930 when the first club in Europe, the Zonta Club of Vienna, was chartered, followed by the Zonta Club of Hamburg. But the first club outside of the United States was in Canada. But that was a neighbor.
Okay. Leah, I mean, as you said, and as we've acknowledged, notwithstanding the fact that there are many challenges, of course, that still continue, and then there are still many struggles confronting Filipino women. Relatively speaking, it is a progressive society in that regard. By measures, for example, both in public and corporate leadership, there are more Filipino women also. That compares very well with other countries. What is it about our country right now, would you say? With the culture, the legal environment, in everything that defines and that creates the opportunities as well as any continuing risks in our society?
Well, in the Philippines, we know that there is work-wise, there is a pay disparity, even the position in the government, there are fewer women in the government. And would like to say that hopefully that women will be more active in participating in especially in the government and any decision making in that sense, because women are more affected when there is a calamity or when there is this pandemic. We are always affected more than men. And more than always, we have seen that women can actually do better. I mean, we know that in other countries, the countries that made the COVID response better was led by women. And here in the Philippines, hopefully we should have the same.
Leah, how are you encouraging women to participate more in governance? I'm asking this because this is the theme of International Women's Day this year, to promote greater roles for women in governance. Do you have any particular projects regarding this within the Philippines, within the district?
We have supported the law, like the anti-bastos law. We had webinars about it so that people would be aware of it. Of course, the anti-violence against women and children, we were the one who lobbied about it. Who lobbied for it, and it was passed into law at that time. But participation of women in governance, I'm sad to say that we don't have any project about that. But although we have a strong voice in different advocacies, we have members who are in government. We have members who are lawyers, doctors. Basically, that I'm sad to say that we don't have project yet in involving ourselves in government. First of all, we are non-partisan and non-sectarian.
But I see that you have other projects here. You have radio shows. You are
Oh yes,
radio
yeah.
promote women empowerment. Maybe
We
you
have
more about it.
we have local advocacy projects, like you mentioned. We have this is in Ilocos Norte. We have the weekly radio program called Usapang Babae. So they tackle different issues on women. And then there's a talk show that's called All About Eve. We even have a e-cooking and business workshop and online legal consultation. So
Are you also recruiting members? Do you recruit or do people apply? How do people become part of your group? How do women become part of your group?
Members, prospective members I personally was invited to join Zonta, but now we accept application. So the application goes to the Zonta International, and then they throw it to the district that's concerned, the area that's concerned. What are the qualifications needed? Of course, they should believe in our advocacy that we empower women and girls. And of course, they have to belong to reputable, they have to have moral character, of course, and they have to have, what you call that? They have to have at least in a decision-making policy position. They should belong to that. Well, of course, they have to be professionals and executives.
Okay. And Pam, assuming that they're qualified and they're interested, where can they go? Do you have a website? Do you have a Facebook page where people can go?
Right now, especially during this, the lockdown, and we can't travel anywhere, and we're more connected on Zoom, on Facebook, and other social media, they are able to find where the location of the club, the Zonta club, is closest to them geographically. There they can go and maybe call or ask in the Facebook whoever wants to join. But if they have to see first where they are located geographically. So for those in the Philippines, because we have throughout the 4 areas, whoever is close to that particular club, they could just contact that club. And we have seen that actually. And we don't know about that until it goes to Zonta International headquarters, and then it gets back to us that they want to join us. But before, like in my case also, I was invited to join Zonta from here, Area 6, Thailand, and I belong to the Zonta Club of Bangkok too.
Okay.
So one of my advisors is the one who invited.
Okay. Thank you very much. Chawali Pamela Osathanugrah and Leah Bautista of the Zonta International Foundation. Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kailangan naman. Thank you.
And that will be all for this special edition of CHIEFS, but we hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
And I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News.